Gensokyo, the realm in which humans, yokai, and many other creatures thrive. Reimu Hakure is a resident in such a setting that, as a shrine maiden, has taken it upon herself to settle any disturbances that may occur. Starting in 1996, a man going by the pseudonym Zun had started what would be known as the Touhou Project, a line of games that carried Reimu and her friend's story in Gensokyo, while sticking to the bullet hell shoot-'em-up genre. In collaboration with other game companies, the project grew. Soon, he amassed a loyal and dedicated fanbase that had brought Touhou into many other outlets of media. It was a series I was aware of for a while, but had no clue as to context or even what it was about. So, naturally, I grew curious. But due to the sheer amount of content that had been created since its inception, the doors to enter were imposing. What would be the best introduction to this world and its characters, I thought. And luckily, while not being concise, through a few searches on the topic, I quickly found my footing in the 6th game, the start of the series reboot, Embodiment of Scarlet Devil. As someone who hasn't touched anything like a bullet hell before, I was excited to begin. Although I was aware that my first few steps were to be arduous, I did not falter and jumped straight in, believing that I was ready for any challenge to be thrown at me, only to soon realize that my mind was not yet ready for lunacy, immediately getting put in my place. Embodiment of Scarlet Devil did a fantastic job of grabbing my attention, not only through its gameplay style that at the time was unique to me, but in combination with its soundtrack became an addictive ride that, despite having to repeat the cycle of game over again and again, never led me to an irate state. Then to reach the finale using all resources available, only to realize that losing all lives, then continuing, leads to a bad end, hampering my excitement. Coming to the realization that I must complete all 6 stages in one go to earn a good ending, with 4 in total. Through many attempts, days passed. I slowly grasped each pattern, each spawn of an enemy, and positioned myself to flourish. Run by run, day by day, I got further than the last. And when the Scarlet Devil herself was reduced to glitter, the satisfaction as a result was too gratifying for words. What would have been a series I could have run through without much thought became something my mind marinated in, giving even greater attachment than what would have been. And as each ending was reached, I decided to try out the extra stage. And, well, it did not go well. I usually do only 1 to 3 runs a day to avoid getting bored and to prevent myself from getting through them quickly, as they are pretty short. And with the extra stage, a single stage mind you, I played it for a week straight and only made it halfway through the boss. Thus concluded that I will give any extra stage a go, but not more than 5 attempts to save my sanity. And anything I missed out on will be supplemented by the wiki or videos. Embodiment of Scarlet Devil was a near-perfect introduction for myself, with only a couple aspects I would say I disliked. Most of them though stemming from the lack of a visual hitbox. But besides that, it was a wonderful introduction to the series, and the cast that debuted are still some of my favorites. It also established my criteria for moving on to the next game, which is simply completing the basic stages on all characters and their spell cards to unlock all possible endings. Now somewhat familiar with the game, I moved on to Touhou 7, Perfect Cherry Blossom. The first notable change was the expanded roster, turning Sakuya Izoi, the time-stopping maid from the previous game, into a playable character. And so, I began the same way I had last time, starting with Reimu. Immediately apparent was the improved backgrounds and attack patterns, giving each enemy encounter extra flair. Winding and looping, the barrages to weave in and out of had an air of relative complexity, Once again, my mind was enveloped in a rondo to avoid increasingly difficult bullet patterns, all to the beautiful tracks in the background. For some reason, the soundtrack just seemed to click with me in this game. A moment I will always remember happens in Stage 4's climax, where after streaming through tracking projectiles, an opponent spewing a well-crafted barrage arrives, and upon its defeat, where the music has reached its climax, the enemy numbers and the music falls back to square one. The atmosphere could be carried solely by the music alone, bringing me to the realization that the soundtrack isn't a secondary element to elevate the gameplay, but could very well be the primary experience. Each stage is a crescendo to the boss, and since the stages are on rails, the music is perfectly fine-tuned to what appears on screen. The gameplay complements the music just as well as the music complements the gameplay. This relationship between the two is what I believe creates the unique Touhou experience. In between these two is the transient yet entertaining character interactions that take place before and after boss fights. Though they are no longer than 30 seconds in length, the respective main character and their opponent always manage to bounce off of each other well, no matter the contrast in personalities. And in Perfect Cherry Blossom and subsequent titles, these exchanges come off a lot more natural. One thing I love about indulging in a creator's work is starting from the beginning to see the gradual climb in quality. And with just this 1 year gap between 6 and 7, such improvement is apparent. While Embodiment of Scarlet Devil hooked me, Perfect Cherry Blossom allowed me to appreciate the work Zune puts into these games. With feelings high, my journey continued forth with Touhou 8 Imperishable Knight. I've been wondering, with 18 mainline games, what innovations could be made to the formula to keep each game feeling fresh, while not straying too far, and Imperishable Knight had answered. There were many changes to how you earn lives, the playable characters, and most importantly, added an entirely new gameplay mechanic centered around focus. A movement option that was originally used to slow down in order to make concise maneuvers, but now what you can shoot is determined on what mode you are in. Some enemies now have weapons surrounding them that can be shot when out of focus, allowing for more strategy and possibilities. Adding an extra layer of decision making. Do you make yourself more vulnerable to take out a weapon, or be subjected to its fire and hope to avoid? With the game also being set at a fast pace, it spiced up the gameplay to be more engaging. As soon as I began, I was met with beats that were aggressive compared to the other Stage 1 themes. Though that does not detract from the atmosphere, as it's a race against time, reflected in both the gameplay and music. Every aspect of this game comes together to deliver an all-around superb experience that is never boring, even when replaying the beginning stages again and again. It cranks everything that makes Touhou amazing to 11, and is an even further improvement on the formula than 7 was to 6. I believe it has one of the most memorable Touhou soundtracks, with the most fun gameplay design out of the ones I've played so far. Really, the only downside was that the new cast wasn't all that notable for the most part. There was Moko, who I thought was interesting, but I felt the others to shine later on. In Touhou 9 Phantasmagoria: A Flower View. To be blunt, I loathe the gameplay style as it shifted to a one-on-one versus system. That, to be fair, introduced an abundance of innovative ideas that could be fun with friends, but feel they did not mesh well for solo play. It took away what I love from Touhou's gameplay loop, ending up more reliant on reflexes and luck. With the game also having a total of 14 endings, it just felt like a chore to play at times, which I feel is disingenuous to say because there is passion put into it. That much is clear from the music, story, and characters. Brimming with melancholic undertones, the afterlife of Gensokyo is touched upon, being fleshed out by various perspectives who come to know of it. It was surprisingly an intriguing side to the world that I'd become invested in. And of course, with 14 playable characters and an extra 2 stages, there were a lot more opportunities to characterize, which worked out for the best. Many made a return, while others made their debut. creating my favorite Touhou cast so far that almost felt like a finale of sorts. But knowing another 9 games lie over the horizon, I was ready to return to the classic formula. Touhou 10, Mountain of Faith is the last game I played at the time of uploading this. Besides the revamped bomb, power, and point mechanics, Mountain of Faith doesn't change much in terms of gameplay, but does strive to perfect the route. Every corner of this game feels polished, taking the best aspect of each game and applying it all here, excelling in its characters, story, gameplay, and music, while also improving visually. Environments are now accented with extra detail that coincides with the music to add a nice touch of atmosphere. Stage 4 is where this department shines best, where you ascend a waterfall as enemies appear out of it for surprise attacks, one after another, looking for silhouettes and positioning accordingly. I also want to note that the bosses are by far my favorite batch. The earlier bosses are chaotic, while still maintaining beautiful looking attacks, while the later stage bosses require more thought and varied approaches. They are simply the most fun I've had with any Touhou boss fights. I have no complaints whatsoever, maybe except for the difficulty spike in between stages 3 and 4 that have thrown me off many times when playing casually, but other than that, I love it to death. And that marks all the Touhou content I've experienced thus far. So before I sign off, I want to give a ranking of the 5 games as well as mention my favorite tracks of each. Obviously enough, my least favorite is Touhou 9. Boasting an interesting story, but the process of unraveling it made it difficult to push through. It held the return of many old boss themes, as well as had some euphonious additions such as Aya and Shikieki's theme, Wind God Girl, and Fate of 60 Years respectively. A distant 4th place belongs to Touhou 6. It was a phenomenal introduction showcasing the heart of Touhou. It was the game I became the most familiar with. Since it was also my first bullet hell, a lot of that time was spent learning the basics. A few tracks that really stood out were Cerno's theme, Beloved Tomboyish Daughter, Sakuya's Lunar Clock, and Remelia's Septet for the Dead Queen. It was overall a well-rounded game that set a stable foundation for the future. Touhou 7 in 3rd is an all-around improvement to the gameplay, writing, and overall tone setting. I really enjoyed Yomu's time manipulation ability, and for a final boss, Yuyuko was the icing on the cake. The theme of her final stand, Border of Life, can enforce that feeling of assured triumph, or in my case, impending doom. The capital city of Flowers in the Sky and the Phantasm stage, Necrophantasia, are some of my favorites here as well. Debating what to put in the second spot was difficult. Both of the remaining options are practically equal, and though it may change, I'm putting Touhou 8, Imperishable Knight here, proving to be an even further amelioration on the formula, embracing a more breakneck approach reflected in the focus fire mechanic and energetic soundtrack, of which I find Nightbird, Imperishable Knight, and Lunatic Princess being a few standouts. Though I think Imperishable Knight to be the best gameplay-wise, Touhou 10, Mountain of Faith has refined each piece of what makes a Touhou experience and blended it all into an amalgamation of pure bliss, ending it off on my 2 favorite boss fights, Sanae Kochiya and Kanoko Yasaka. I find both 8 and 10's OST to be so close, but I feel Mountain of Faith's diversity makes each stage and boss pronounced, sporting a wide variety of atmospheric, upbeat, and overall comforting tracks. So while I choose these 3, this list could easily change. Stage 3's The Gensokyo the Gods Loved, Stage 4's Fall Autumnal Waterfall, and Sanae Kochiya's theme, Faith is for the Transient People. It all comes together as a neat package that forms the epitome of what makes Touhou captivating. On the horizon lies a bountiful bunch of unexplored territory, with both official and extraordinarily made fan content. My odyssey through the Touhou landscape is grand, but that makes each step reassuring. I've been enjoying it immensely, anticipating the start of each entry, enjoying it for what it is, then getting to see what other doors of content open up. I've started going back through the 0.5 games I missed, as well as started the I cannot believe it's not official fan-made anime. I'm going to take my time to truly enjoy each piece, and though it may take a while, I'm here to enjoy the stay. And with that, I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching. Later.